Daniel Carter sat on the cold concrete beneath the overpass, wrapped in a thin blanket that did little to block the morning chill. At 23 years old, he looked both younger and older than his years. Younger in the innocence that somehow survived in his eyes despite everything. Older in the lines that had formed around those eyes, carved by grief and hardship no college sophomore should have to endure. The cardboard sign propped beside him read, simply, "Veteran son. Lost everything. Anything helps. God bless." He hated the sign, hated the reduction of his entire story to 6 words designed to elicit sympathy from strangers. But pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. His few possessions, a change of clothes, a water bottle, his father's dog tags, sat in a weathered backpack beside him. It was a cool October morning in Palo Alto, California, and the tech workers streamed past him on their way to offices and coffee shops, most averting their eyes with practiced efficiency. Daniel had learned not to take it personally. Invisibility was the default state of homelessness. People looked through you, not at you, as if poverty might be contagious. 10 years ago, Daniel's father, Staff Sergeant Michael Carter, had been killed by an IED in Afghanistan. Daniel had been 13, old enough to understand death, but too young to process the magnitude of losing a parent who had defined what manhood meant to him. His mother, Jennifer, had held him together through sheer force of will, working 2 jobs to keep their modest apartment and save for Daniel's education. She had been so proud when he was accepted to San Jose State University's computer science program. "Your father would have been so proud," she had said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him on move-in day. "You're going to do amazing things, baby." For 2 years, Daniel had thrived. He loved coding the way some people love music or art. The pure logic of it, the way problems that seemed impossibly complex could be solved with elegant solutions. His professors noticed his talent, mentioned graduate school, talked about internships at major tech companies. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. A drunk driver running a red light. His mother's small sedan crumpled like paper. Jennifer Carter died instantly. The police officer had told him, his voice professional but kind. She didn't suffer, but Daniel suffered. God, how he suffered. The life insurance policy his mother had been paying for barely covered funeral expenses. The apartment lease was in her name only, and the landlord, while sympathetic, needed it rented to someone who could actually pay. Daniel's financial aid covered tuition but not living expenses, and without his mother's contribution, he couldn't afford both food and housing. He tried to work full-time while attending classes full-time. Lasted 3 months before exhaustion and malnutrition led to him collapsing during a midterm exam. When he was released from the hospital with a bill he couldn't pay, he made the calculation that would define the next 4 years of his life. Survival first, education second. He withdrew from school, lost his student housing, sold everything he owned, his textbooks, his furniture, his winter coat, even his phone, just to eat for a few more weeks. He tried to find work, but without a phone for callbacks or an address for applications. Even minimum wage jobs were impossible. He told himself it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. But temporary had a way of becoming permanent when you were living day to day. At night, he slept in doorways, under overpasses, occasionally in shelters when the weather turned brutal. He learned which restaurants threw away untouched food at closing, which coffee shops would get him a cup of water without judgment, which police officers would move him along politely versus those who treated him like a criminal. He spent his days trying to stay warm, trying to stay safe, trying to remember what it felt like to have dreams instead of just survival instincts. For years of this half-life, this liminal existence between the person he had been and the person circumstances had forced him to become. He still remembered programming concepts sometimes, would catch himself mentally solving problems as he walked the streets. But without access to computers, without ways to practice or learn, those skills were fading like old photographs left in the sun. For years of this half-life, this liminal existence between the person he had been and the person's circumstances had forced him to become. On this particular October morning, Daniel was so lost in memory that he almost didn't notice when someone stopped directly in front of him. Most people gave him a wide berth, as if his misfortune created an invisible force field around him. The man who had stopped wore faded jeans, an unremarkable gray hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. Dark sunglasses obscured his eyes. Nothing about him suggested wealth or importance. He could have been any of the tech workers who passed daily. But he had stopped, which made him unusual. "Morning," the man said, his voice casual but not condescending. "Morning, sir," Daniel replied automatically, straightening his posture despite his exhaustion. The man seemed to study the cardboard sign. "Veteran's son. Your father served. Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter. Died in 2015. Something in the man's posture changed, became more attentive. "I'm sorry. That's a hell of a loss." The genuine sympathy in the stranger's voice made Daniel's throat tighten. Most people offered platitudes, if they acknowledged him at all. This man spoke like he actually understood loss, like the words cost him something to say. "Thank you, sir." Daniel paused, then found himself adding, "He was a good man. Best man I ever knew." The stranger pulled a $20 bill from his pocket and held it out, but instead of dropping it and walking away as most people did, he remained standing there. "What's your name?" he asked. "Daniel. Daniel Carter." "Nice to meet you, Daniel." The man gestured to the empty space beside him. "Mind if I sit for a minute? I've been walking for a while." Daniel nodded, surprised. Homeless people were for walking past, not sitting beside. But the stranger folded himself down onto the concrete with the ease of someone who wasn't concerned about the dirt or the optics. "So, Daniel Carter, veteran's son," the man said conversationally. "You look young. What's your story? How'd you end up here?" There was something in the question, not judgment, but genuine curiosity, that made Daniel want to answer honestly. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was because the stranger was one of the few people in years who had looked at him and seen an actual human being rather than a problem to be solved or avoided. So, Daniel told him, not the sanitized version for social workers or the abbreviated version for his cardboard sign, but the real story, his father's death, his mother holding their family together through impossible circumstances, getting into college, 2 good years studying computer science, then the drunk driver, the funeral, the impossible choice between education and survival. "I had a 3.8 GPA, Daniel said, surprised by the pride still audible in his voice. "I loved it. Programming, the way code works, how you can build something from nothing, if you understand the logic. I used to stay up all night working on projects, not because I had to, but because I wanted to." "What languages do you know?" the stranger asked. Daniel rattled them off from memory, surprised he could still recall them. Python, Java, JavaScript, C++. I learned some Ruby, too. I haven't written code in 4 years, but I still remember how it works. The logic of it, The man tilted his head, interest evident even behind the sunglasses. "You remember all that after 4 years without practicing?" "I think about it sometimes," Daniel admitted. "When I'm walking around or trying to fall asleep, I'll mentally solve problems, design systems in my head. Sounds crazy, but it helps me remember who I used to be. So why not go back to school now? Financial aid, loans, their ways." Daniel laughed, but it came out bitter. "Try applying for student housing when you list your current address as various locations around Palo Alto. Try getting a loan when you have no credit history, no cosigner, no proof of stable income. The system works great if you're already stable. If you're not," he gestured around them at the overpass, the sparse belongings, the cardboard sign. "This is what happens." The stranger was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "If you could go back, if someone handed you an opportunity to finish your degree, get back into tech, would you take it?" "In a heartbeat," Daniel said without hesitation. Not even a question. "Why? You could have walked away completely, found some minimum wage job, given up on the whole tech dream. Why keep learning programming languages when you're living under an overpass?" Daniel thought about his father, about the way Sergeant Carter had never quit anything in his life, even when quitting would have been easier, about his mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion to give him opportunities she'd never had, because they believed I could do something important. Daniel said quietly. My dad died protecting this country. My mom died trying to give me a future. I can't just waste that. Even if I'm stuck here, even if it takes me 10 more years, I'm going to finish what they helped me start. The stranger nodded slowly. What's your dream? If circumstances were different, what would you be doing? Working at one of the big tech companies. Daniel admitted, not for the money, though that would be nice, but to build things that matter, apps that help people, systems that solve real problems. My mom used to say I was going to change the world. He smiled sadly. Guess that didn't work out. Not yet, the stranger corrected. Didn't work out yet. There was something odd in the way he said it, with a certainty that seemed misplaced given Daniel's circumstances. But before Daniel could question it, the man pulled out his phone. Let me ask you something else. If you had to solve a programming problem right now, could you? Depends on the problem, Daniel said. But, yeah, probably. The stranger thought for a moment, then said, Okay, how would you design a system to optimize traffic flow in a city using real-time data? Daniel's mind immediately engaged with the problem, the way it always did when presented with a coding challenge. You'd need IoT sensors at intersections feeding data to a central system, machine learning algorithm to identify patterns and predict congestion, API integration with GPS systems in vehicles, weight different variables, emergency vehicles get priority routing, public transit optimization. He continued for several minutes, sketching out the architecture with his hands, lost in the puzzle of it. When he finished, the stranger was smiling. That's good, really good. You've still got it. Thanks, Daniel said, feeling a small spark of pride. It had been so long since anyone had asked him to think like a programmer, rather than just survive like a homeless person. The stranger stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. Daniel, I want you to meet me here tomorrow morning. Same time. Can you do that? Sure, Daniel said, confused. Why? Because I think I can help you. But I need to make some calls first, set some things up. He reached into his wallet and pulled out several more bills. Daniel counted $200 and handed them over. Get yourself some decent food today. Not fast food, actual nutrition. You're too thin. Sir, I can't. You can? The man interrupted firmly. Consider it an advance on your future success. Tomorrow morning, be here. And Daniel, yes! Don't lose hope. Your story isn't over. Not even close. As the stranger walked away, Daniel called after him. Wait, I don't even know your name. What do you do? The man turned back, and even behind the sunglasses and baseball cap, Daniel could see the hint of a smile. I work in tech, he said simply, and tomorrow I'll answer all your questions. Just be here. Then he was gone, disappearing into the morning crowd of commuters and coffee seekers, leaving Daniel holding $200 and a spark of something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. That evening, Daniel did something he hadn't done in months. Using the money the stranger had given him, he bought a cheap phone card and called the one person he still had contact with, his father's old military buddy, Uncle Frank, who had tried to help Daniel years ago before his own financial troubles made that impossible. Uncle Frank? It's Daniel. Danny, Jesus. Kid, where have you been? I've been worried sick. I'm okay. Well, I'm alive. Frank, something weird happened today. He told him about the stranger, the conversation, the promise to return tomorrow. Frank listened in characteristic silence, then said, Kid, be careful. Sounds too good to be true. I know, but Frank, what if it's not? What if this is my shot? Then you take it. Frank said firmly, your dad never turned away from an opportunity, and neither should you. Just be smart about it, okay? That night, Daniel found himself doing something else he hadn't done in years. He pulled out the photograph of his parents he kept wrapped in plastic, protected from the elements. His father in his dress uniform, stern but smiling. His mother beside him, radiating pride and love. I met someone today, Daniel whispered to the photo. I don't know who he is or why he stopped to talk to me, but he asked about you, Dad. He seemed to care that you served. And Mom, he asked what I want to do with my life. I told him what you always said, that I could change the world. The next morning, Daniel was at the overpass by 6 a.m., 2 hours early. He had used some of the money to clean up at a public restroom, washing his face and hands as best he could, trying to make himself presentable for whatever was coming. At 8:15 a.m., he heard it before he saw it. The distinctive hum of an expensive electric vehicle. A black Tesla Model S pulled up to the curb near the overpass, utterly incongruous in this run-down part of town. The window rolled down, and a young woman in professional attire leaned out. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes." "Please come with us. We're here to help you." Daniel approached cautiously. "Help me how? Who sent you?" The back door opened, revealing another professionally dressed person, this one a man in his 30s with kind eyes. "We work for someone who was very impressed with you yesterday." The man explained. "He's asked us to assist you with some basics before you meet with him. Nothing concerning, I promise. We're going to take you to get cleaned up properly, some new clothes, maybe a haircut if you like. Then we'll bring you to meet him. Is that okay?" Daniel looked at the Tesla, at the professional people, at this whole surreal situation. Every instinct screamed that this couldn't be real, that he was being scammed or exploited. But something else, maybe desperation, maybe intuition, maybe just a memory of the stranger's genuine interest, made him nod. "Okay, but if this is some kind of weird human trafficking thing." The woman laughed. "It's not, I promise. We're from HR. We do this sort of thing occasionally." HR? What company had HR people picking up homeless individuals? The next 3 hours passed in a blur. They took him to a high-end men's salon where a patient's stylist cut and styled his hair, trimmed his beard. Then to a shower facility, the first real shower he'd had in months, with actual hot water and quality soap. They provided him with clothes, dark jeans, a button-down shirt, a blazer, new shoes. When Daniel looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The person looking back at him looked like who he used to be, a college student with potential, not a homeless man with nothing. "Where are we going now?" Daniel asked as they got back in the Tesla. "To meet someone who wants to talk to you about your future." The woman said cryptically. They drove to a building Daniel had passed 1,000 times but never imagined entering. The sleek, modern campus of one of the world's most innovative tech companies. SpaceX headquarters. Daniel's confusion deepened as they were waved through security, as they walked through halls where engineers and scientists moved with purpose, where the walls displayed rockets and satellites and dreams made manifest. They entered a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the engineering bays. And there, sitting at the table reviewing what looked like design specifications, was the stranger from yesterday. Except now Daniel could see his face clearly, without the baseball cap and sunglasses obscuring his features. And with a shock of recognition that nearly stopped his heart, Daniel realized exactly who had sat beside him on the concrete yesterday. Elon Musk looked up and smiled. "Hello again, Daniel. Thanks for coming." Daniel's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. You're... "Yeah," Musk said, standing and extending his hand. "I probably should have introduced myself properly yesterday, but I like to take walks without being recognized sometimes. Lets me have actual conversations with people who aren't trying to pitch me something." Daniel shook his hand in a daze. "I told you my whole life story. I complained about the system to one of the richest men in the world." Musk laughed. "You told me an honest story about loss, perseverance, and refusing to give up on your dreams despite impossible circumstances. That's worth a hell of a lot more than the polished pitches I usually hear." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down. Let's talk about your future." Daniel sat, still processing this impossible situation. Elon Musk. He had spent an hour talking to Elon Musk and hadn't realized it. "I did some checking after our conversation," Musk said, pulling up a tablet. "Called San Jose State. Verified your transcripts. 3.8 GPA in computer science. Consistently top of your class until you withdrew. Professors remember you fondly. Say you were one of the most naturally talented programmers they'd taught." He looked up. "That true, or were they being nice?" I worked hard," Daniel managed. "I loved it. Your solution to the traffic optimization problem yesterday was solid. Not perfect, but solid. Better than I'd expect from someone who hasn't been in school for 4 years. Musk set down the tablet. Here's what I'm thinking. I want to offer you something, but it's not a handout. It's an opportunity with conditions. Daniel leaned forward, his heart pounding. First, I'm going to fund your return to San Jose State. Full scholarship for the remainder of your degree. Tuition, housing, books, living expenses, everything. You focus on school, finish strong. Daniel felt tears prickling his eyes, but forced them back. Sir, I can't. Second condition, Musk continued. You're going to work here part-time. 20 hours a week during the school year. We'll work around your class schedule. You'll start in the junior developer role. Nothing fancy, but it'll be real work on real projects. It'll pay enough that you won't need to worry about money. Third condition, when you graduate, and notice I said when, not if, we'll evaluate your performance in both school and work. If you've proven you can handle both, maintain your grades, contribute meaningfully here, then we transition you to full-time. Proper salary, benefits, career path, the whole package. Musk leaned forward. But here's the thing, Daniel. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing this because yesterday I met a young man who lost everything but refused to quit learning, who answered a complex technical question with intelligence and creativity, who honored his parents' sacrifices by staying committed to their dream for him, even when it seemed impossible. That's the kind of person I want working on the projects we're building here. Daniel couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They streamed down his face as he tried to process what was being offered. Not charity, but a chance. Not pity, but recognition of his potential. Why? Daniel asked. Why me? You must meet hundreds of people with potential. Musk was quiet for a moment. My own story isn't so different from yours in some ways. Different circumstances. But I've known what it's like to have everyone tell you your dreams are impossible. I've known what it's like to bet everything on something people say won't work. The difference is I had resources and support. You had nothing but your own determination, and you still kept learning, kept believing you could make it back. He smiled slightly. That's not weakness. That's exactly the kind of strength we need more of. I won't let you down, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I swear to God, I will work harder than anyone. I know you will, Musk interrupted gently. That's why I'm making this offer. Now, some logistics. HR will get you set up with housing near campus, help you re-enroll for the spring semester, get your employment paperwork processed. You start here next Monday. Orientation, meet your team, get up to speed on our systems. He stood, signaling the meeting was ending, but his expression was warm. Daniel, your parents will be proud of you, not because of what you're about to do, but because of who you've been during the worst years of your life. Don't lose that. As Daniel left the building in a daze, escorted by the same HR team, he felt untethered from reality. 12 hours ago, he had been sleeping under an overpass. Now he had a job at SpaceX, a scholarship to finish his degree, and a future that looked completely different from anything he'd imagined possible. The HR team took him to a modest apartment near the San Jose State campus. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, and his. When they left him alone with promises to check in the next day, Daniel stood in the empty living room and finally allowed himself to break down. He sobbed for his father, who had died never knowing if his sacrifice had meant anything, for his mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion to give him opportunities. For the 4 years he'd lost to grief and survival. And finally, for the impossible gift he'd just been given, a second chance. When he could finally stand again, Daniel knew what he needed to do. He took the bus to Colma, the city of cemetery south of San Francisco, where his mother rested beside his father. The cemetery was quiet at sunset, the October light painting everything gold. Daniel stood before the shared headstone. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter, U.S. Army, 1975 to 2015. Beloved father and husband, Jennifer Marie Carter, 1977 to 2019. Beloved mother and wife. Daniel knelt in the grass, placed his hand on the cold stone, and spoke through his tears. I met someone yesterday. Someone who saw me when everyone else looks away. He's giving me a chance, Mom. A real chance. I'm going back to school. I'm going to finish my degree like you wanted. I got a job at SpaceX. Can you believe that? SpaceX. His voice broke. I'm so sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I gave up for a while. But I'm back now. I'm going to make you both proud. I promise. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, just a moment, Daniel could almost hear his mother's voice. We were always proud of you, baby. Always. 6 months later, Daniel Carter walked across the San Jose State campus with purpose, heading to his afternoon class. He wore jeans and a SpaceX hoodie, carried a new laptop, moved with the confident stride of someone who belonged. His grades were strong, better than before, actually because now he understood how precious the opportunity was. His work at SpaceX challenged him in ways that made him better, teaching him not just to code, but to think like an engineer solving problems that actually mattered. But the most important change wasn't visible in his GPA or his work evaluations. It was in how he saw other people, particularly those who were struggling, those who were invisible to everyone else. He volunteered at homeless shelters now, not just serving food, but sitting down and talking to people, really listening to their stories. He worked with a nonprofit that helped homeless youth get back into education. He spoke at his father's old military base about supporting families of fallen soldiers. And once a month, he met Elon Musk for coffee, not as employee and CEO, but as two people who had connected in an unexpected moment and maintained that connection. They talked about technology, about innovation, but also about responsibility and second chances. You know what the most valuable thing is in business? Musk had asked him during one of these conversations. It's not money or connections, or even intelligence. It's recognizing potential in unexpected places and being willing to bet on it. Daniel had thought about that, about how he had been that unexpected place, that unconventional bet, and he had decided that if he ever had the resources, the success, the opportunity, he would do the same thing for someone else. 2 years after that morning under the overpass, Daniel graduated with highest honors. His capstone project, a system for optimizing resource distribution in disaster relief efforts, was selected for implementation by a major humanitarian organization. At the graduation ceremony, an empty chair in the audience held a photo of his parents, his father in uniform and his mother smiling. Next to them sat Uncle Frank, who had driven from out of state to be there. And a few rows back, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses to avoid being recognized, sat Elon Musk, who had taken the morning off to watch a young man he had met on a sidewalk prove exactly what Musk had believed he could become. As Daniel walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the announcer mentioned he would be starting full-time at SpaceX the following month. The applause was polite but unremarkable, just another graduate heading to another tech job. But for Daniel, it represented so much more. It represented his father's sacrifice being honored through his son's success, his mother's dreams being realized through his achievements. And most of all, it represented a truth he would carry with him forever, that sometimes the difference between giving up and breaking through is someone taking the time to see you, really see you, when you're at your lowest point. That evening, Daniel returned once more to his parents' grave. This time he brought his diploma and the employment letter from SpaceX. I did it, he said simply, placing both documents on a headstone. I finished what we started. And Mom, Dad, I'm not going to forget what it was like. I'm not going to walk past people the way everyone walked past me. If I can do for someone else what someone did for me, then maybe all of this, all the loss, all the pain, all of it, maybe it will have meant something. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as Daniel Carter stood, his hand resting on his parents' headstone one final time. He thought about the morning a stranger in a baseball cap had stopped to talk to a homeless young man under an overpass, about how easily Musk could have walked past him the way thousands of others had. But he hadn't walked past. He had stopped. He had listened. He had seen potential where society saw only a problem. As Daniel left the cemetery and headed toward the future, toward SpaceX, toward the career he had nearly lost, toward all the possibilities that now lay before him, he made himself a promise. He would spend the rest of his life looking for people everyone else walked past, and he would stop. Because sometimes change in the world starts with seeing one person who needs to be seen.